Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Marcus Aurelius. This is Citadelium, episode 7, and I'm your host, Yuri Degaya. Today I want to talk about yet another type of the citadel that we want to build, and this type of citadel I think has to be built even before any other types of citadels. If you remember, I already talked about the digital citadel and the physical citadels. The digital citadel being a so-called distributed country, the country that is online with its nation that is distributed across the world. And the physical citadel, is essentially an outpost for the digital citadel. It is an actual physical location. It may be a city-state, or a village, or an enclave inside a country. So there is a third type of the citadel that I would like to build myself, and I would like to explain why it's important to build for everybody else before you actually venture out into the physical world and build real physical things there. It is very important to build this type of citadel because it is my belief that your inner composition, your inner world, the world that you have inside of you, the world of the self, is very important because the outer world reflects your inner composition. So that is why I call this citadel the inner citadel. It is not really my term, I didn't invent it. There have been other authors that came up with such a term. So I'm just gonna explain to you what it means to me. If I had to explain it in very short terms, then the best explanation would probably come from Jordan Peterson, who actually said in his book 12 Rules for Life, clean your room. That was literally the catchy phrase in the book, and it actually caught on as a meme on the internet. So now you can see everybody say clean your room to anybody who just ventures out there to teach other people how to live, to reform society, and to do all kinds of transformations in the world while not having really put any work on their own inner world, on their own bodies, on their own souls. And as we know, leadership, for example, is something that has to be done by your own personal example. So in the example of a fitness trainer, you cannot be fat to teach people to be fit. It just doesn't make sense. You also cannot be a broke trading instructor. When you teach someone trading courses, you cannot be broke yourself because you have to be really successful to do such things. And in general, about leadership, you cannot be a leader if you don't set the example yourself. You have to not just talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk. You have to live the life that you preach, and you have to show people by your own example how they have to behave, because most people, they need an example, they need a model to follow. And if you are a leader and you want followers, first and foremost, you just have to abide by those rules that you preach. So what involves building your inner citadel? Well, just like with any building, we have two major parts in this. The first part is the foundation. The foundation being the base layer of the citadel. It is something that the actual building stands upon. And the second part is the building itself. This is the citadel, this is your goal, this is what you're building throughout your life, and this is what distinguishes you from other people. Let's start with the foundation. As you know, even in architecture, the foundation is the most important part because the foundation sets the base layer of any building. And of course, if you have a shaky foundation, if it's weak, then you cannot really build a building that is going to last. So this is why I think the foundation of your inner citadel has to be strong as well. And in this part, I could go on to describe some of the esoteric truths out there, such as the septenary constitution of man, or even the seven chakras. And you may have heard of the chakras, of course, especially with all this New Age movement. It's getting pretty popular. But I only want to simplify things here. In terms of the chakras, I just want to mention that if you know anything about them, there are the 3 lower chakras and the 4 upper chakras of the body. The lower ones are more responsible for animalistic impulses in man, whereas the higher you go in the body, the more spiritual those chakras become. They are responsible for more spiritual impulses in men. But I'm hardly an expert on the topic, so in terms of building the foundation of our inner citadel, I'm just going to talk about 2 things here. The first one is spirit and the second one is matter. So I already mentioned spirit and matter before, and I just want to remind you that when I talk about spirit with capital S, what I mean is the higher self. It is this inner world, inner universe that all of us have. It is the so-called spark of divine fire, if you will. So what I'm talking about is essentially a spiritual part of every human being. And when I talk about matter, and also matter spelled with capital M, it's essentially everything that has to do with the body. And to be precise, not with the way your body looks. It is something that has to do with the bodily passions themselves. And by bodily passions, I mean everything that your body experiences and that essentially forces you to think or to act in a certain way. So that includes being hungry, being lustful, being angry, being happy. All those things are bodily passions. So how do we build a solid foundation? There are 2 ways that I think are very important involved in this process. The first one is called via negativa. And I already mentioned via negativa somewhere else as well. This is a term popularized by Nassim Taleb in his Incerto series of books, which I highly recommend to anyone here if you don't have anything to read. But even if you do have something to read, this is something that will really expand your horizons. So via negativa means the negative way. And the negative way means that you have to remove things from your life to fix certain aspects of your life instead of adding something on top. So in terms of building a solid foundation, you have to move away from your bodily passions. Obviously, you are stuck with your body for the rest of your life and you cannot get rid of your body, and this is of course not the goal here. The goal here is to get rid of the passions that essentially control your life. Instead of you being in control, your body controls your life. I will give you a couple of examples. I think for a lot of people, food is quite a bit of a passion. Even for myself, sometimes I indulge in this food is intended to be for energy, it's intended to keep you healthy, but so far we see in the world that the food has become its own industry. It's the food industry. So you go out in the world, and especially when you travel and you ask someone how they like their trip, the first thing a lot of the people say is the food. The food was great. So it's almost like they travel solely to please their stomachs and not really see the place where they go. And this is I think is a real problem here, because people have forgotten that food is supposed to nourish your body and not to please it really. So food is one of the bodily passions that people are addicted to. And bad food, of course, is much worse for you. Things like sugars and different oils made of seeds. But what I'm talking about here is not the health effect of the food, but rather the addiction to it. Another good example, of course, is the lust that people have, and it has to do with wanting more and more sex, more and more sexual relationships that have absolutely nothing to do with raising a family. Of course, sex is a procedure, an act that is designed for a specific purpose, and that purpose is to multiply, to give birth to children, and people have turned sex into its own industry as well, as pornography shows very, very well. So lust is something that is to be subdued as well in your body. As a matter of fact, such things have been covered already in most religions, and the seven deadly sins is a great example of that. I must add that via negativa is a lifelong process. You cannot just remove all your bodily passions tomorrow and be free from them. It's something that you have been dealing with for the majority of your life, of course, and a lot of these addictions, a lot of these routines and habits, they are ingrained in your personality. So it really does take a lot of work to get rid of things like it's like drug addiction. If you want to quit a drug, of course it takes some time, and it's probably connected with some withdrawal, even if it's a minor drug like coffee or caffeine. If you tried quitting coffee, you know that it can be pretty challenging. So now imagine quitting a lot of the things that you considered normal and you have taken for granted so far. So just take it slowly and do it one by one, and or in bunches. It's completely up to you. Everybody has their own pace, but it has to be done in order to improve your foundation. Like I said, you have to remove the underlying problem to fix an issue rather than add something on top of it to patch it. Patching never works. Patching is just a temporary solution, whereas removing the underlying issue is more or less a permanent solution. And the second part of building a solid foundation is education. And that is education that you have to go through from the very beginning, from your childhood. As I mentioned, there exist the so-called 7 liberal arts that I think cover pretty much the basics of how the world and the universe operates. So if you start studying these arts such as rhetoric and mathematics and music and astronomy and all those things, they teach you how the world operates, not only on the level of on the cognitive level, on the level of thinking, but they also teach you how it operates on an intuitive level. This is why, for example, music has been cherished as a very great art, that it has been cherished as this teacher of the world, because once you learn the music very well, the theory and the practice of it, you start understanding the world a little bit better. You start understanding how certain notes and rhythms affect the human mood, and that essentially has very, very big implications, because you start understanding that certain things like these vibrations of sound can actually affect an individual. So everything is connected around the world with these vibrations and waves, and everything depends on the waves and the wavelengths. So this, of course, you have to learn not in terms of all the details, like a very detailed book on physics or mathematics, but more in a general way. And when you are a kid, you would most likely learn these things in terms of games and playing around. Whereas when you grow older, you may dive into deeper details of how these things work. But the fact still remains. You have to learn the basics of how the world operates in order to have a solid foundation. So I have to remind to you once again that a shaky foundation is not going to have a strong citadel built on top of it. A shaky foundation will have a shaky inner citadel, and that citadel is not going to last. And with that inner citadel, unfortunately, I don't think you can just go out in the world and start building really lasting physical citadels. And once you have built a solid foundation for yourself, you can start building the actual edifice, the building of your inner citadel. What does it mean? If you know, there is a saying that the body is the temple of the soul. So it means that your soul lives inside of you, and your body is essentially the vehicle for your soul. And it is essentially a temple or a cathedral in which the soul rests. It is the house where the soul lives throughout your life. That's why it is extremely important to work on your body. You have to work on your body throughout your life. You have to work on making your body beautiful to reflect your inner beauty. Essentially, what I think is that your inner composition, your inner state of mind, state of heart is reflected in your body, because the beauty of the soul essentially wants to go out into the physical world, and it wants to be reflected in anything outside of the body, starting with the body itself and then going out into other material things. So your body is the first thing that you have to work on, because this is how you demonstrate to the world that you have a beautiful and developing and evolving soul. So you have to evolve your body to have a beautiful cathedral, to have this beautiful edifice that essentially praises your soul. It is also very important because, as we know, beauty attracts people. And if you work on your body and you are more beautiful each day, and you can more easily attract other people with your physique, with your facial features, with anything. It's just very natural. People are naturally attracted to beauty, and if you have a beautiful soul, if you're building your inner world, I am very sure that it will be reflected in your body. And of course, everybody is different, and the genetic composition may be different, and some people are born with a beautiful body and beautiful face, others are not so much. It doesn't really matter. I think as long as you work on your inner world, your outer appearance will also improve. And that does not include only this physical appearance that people can see with their eyesight. It also involves this type of energy that people feel between themselves. Your beauty can be reflected in that energy, and a lot of people may feel, you probably experience this when someone very energetic, someone with high positive energy comes into a room, and everybody feels it, right? It's essentially a reflection of this beautiful soul. This beautiful personality reflects the beautiful soul that lives within that person. So this is what I'm talking about. You have to beautify yourself all the time. You have to work on your body. And the second part of building and erecting the actual temple of your soul is what I call, or what is generally called, craft. Craft is what makes your citadel stand out from other citadels. What do I mean by craft? It's very easy. It's essentially an occupation that you have to master and become really, really good at throughout your life. This is something that comes more naturally to you and provides inner peace when you do it, provides you with joy, and it's something that you are really, really designed to do, something that you feel is your destiny to do. And you may already have this craft in your life. Some people are lucky enough to get it from the very early age and just go throughout their lives. For example, professional musicians or artists. Others struggle throughout their life to find the craft and may even find it, by the age of 70 sometimes. As we know, some of the famous billionaires became very, very rich by very old age because they have been struggling all their life with this, but eventually they found their calling and they started a company that made them very rich because they found what it is exactly that they wanted to do. So it differs from person to person, and like I said, it may be a lifelong search for you, but you have to search that craft, you have to search that art that will be yours and no one else's. And this is how your material world is different from others. This is how the reflection of your soul is different from the others. This is how the others distinguish you from the crowd. So when building an inner citadel, find that craft. So to summarize, we have two things to take care of when building the citadel on top of the solid foundation. That is your body. And the second one, which also takes use of your body, is the craft. This is what involves building your inner citadel. And I must say that building such a citadel inside of you may be a lifelong process, and it shouldn't really preclude you from doing your work in the material world, especially if you're a scientist or an artist or you do some kind of creative work or business work. But I think you have to at least focus on the basic principles to achieve a certain level of solidity of the foundation before attempting to go out and actually try to change the world outside of you on a larger scale. Sure, you can do it on a small scale, maybe within a family or your community, but as we know, there are a lot of people whose goal is always to change the world. They just want to change the world because the world is very bad. However, more often than not, these people have to change their inner world first, because this desire to change the outside world usually stems from their inner dissatisfaction with their own self, with their own lives, with how they were raised. And there may be many different reasons for that, starting from childhood trauma to maybe some kind of unfortunate events in their lives. But the fact remains is that they have to work on themselves before telling other people what to do based on how they conceive the world. So the very, very easy piece of advice here is get yourself in order before telling others what to do. And none of us are infallible. So for myself, I am going through this process, and I've been going through the process for years now. And I fall back into some old habits from time to time, and it takes a lot of effort. But it is through this struggle, it is through this discomfort that you actually can cause evolution of your inner world. Because if you are feeling comfortable all the time, there is absolutely no movement in your life. Comfort is essentially death when it comes to material life. Comfort does not move you any further. So you have to go out there and do things that are not really comfortable. Inside, in terms of your inner work, and outside as well. This propels you. As they say, the better path is the path least taken. This is it for today, and while I do give some advice here sometimes, just remember that I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just describing the way I see the world, the way I understand things currently. A lot of this can be proven wrong in the future as I learn more and more in this life. And as soon as I learn that I'm incorrect in some way, I will of course correct my course, and I will probably record another episode of the podcast and explain to you why I was wrong at some point. But you have to take everything that I say with a grain of salt. But I don't think that in this episode I said anything too controversial. It's very basics of life, I think. You have to really work on yourself, on your inner world, your personality, on developing your own skills before actually trying to impose your will on others. I think it makes sense on a very intuitive level. You don't really have to overthink this. With that said, I hope you liked the episode, and if you did, please subscribe at thegaia.co, and until next time.